Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching this. Anyway, hi, my name's Imi, and on behalf of HSDC Alton College Christian Union, I will be doing the last talk of our series of Women in the Bible, and today's woman is Hannah. Okay, so what's the context of Hannah's story? Well, we can find Hannah's story in the Old Testament in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 1. Hannah is married to Elkanah, who has another wife called Peninnah. Peninnah was able to have children easily, but Hannah struggled to get pregnant. Okay, so now I will be doing the Bible reading of 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 4 to 20. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then the woman went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him from the Lord. Okay, I didn't say this before, but this version was taken from the ESV. Okay, so why was it relevant at the time? Okay, so Hannah's son Samuel became Israel's last judge, and a judge was basically a ruler or a military leader before they began using monarchy instead of judges. Hannah has one of the many stories that include fertility issues in the Bible. Think of Abraham and his wife and how long it took for them to have a child. And basically how God uses the time of waiting to increase our faith and the faith of others for his will. Having more than one wife was seen as the norm at the time, and Hannah not being able to have children, she would have been looked down upon, hence Peninnah being nasty to her. Okay, so how is it relevant now? So fertility and pregnancy complications are still occurring to this day, and Hannah's story can be a comfort to those waiting to be parents. For God, nothing is impossible. We just need to keep praying and put our trust fully in Him. Now, continuing on the theme of patience and waiting, I'm sure we are all waiting for lockdown to be eased so we can do what we like. But just think of the amazing things God has been and is doing with the situation. As one thing that comes to mind, although I didn't write it on the PowerPoint, is like how many more people are attending online church. So we are reaching out and spreading the gospel to more people than before, and I just think that's amazing. Anyway, just remember how He can turn situations around like Hannah's. Okay, so what can we take away from this? Even when Peninnah was being nasty to Hannah and picking on her, Hannah doesn't lose her faith in God. If anything, it made her faith stronger. So even if people are unkind to you about anything, don't let that affect your relationship with God. This story highlights the power of prayer. In the place of worship, Hannah doesn't use physical words. God can see what is on our hearts, and He listens to that. And even if we cannot think of the words to say, God knows and hears. And God has a plan for each and every one of us. We just need to trust Him completely. Okay, so that's the end of the main talk, and now I'm going to pray. So Lord, I thank You for the story of Hannah and how You have blessed her when she needed it the most. And I thank You that this story is able to bless others and give inspiration and hope. Yeah. And I pray a blessing over each and every one of us, whether that's at Christian Union today or whether they're watching at home. I just bless them, pray safety, and I thank You for today. Amen. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. I will hopefully see you soon. Bye.
Right. So thank you to Emmy for that. I think that was really, really encouraging. And I'm just going to sort of finish up, I guess, round up the whole series in sort of about 5 minutes or so. So we've obviously covered 9 women over 7 sessions, and each woman, there we go, we have the list there. So we started all the way back in May time with Esther, and then we did Ruth, Mary, Martha, Deborah, Jael, Priscilla, and now Hannah. And each of these women have a very different story. They're all individuals who had faith and saw God move in them. And we kind of wanted to cover a wide variety of women, especially this sort of second half term. We've looked at kind of slightly more less well-known women, I guess, in the Bible, or people that we often forget because they don't actually appear in that much, but they still have pretty incredible stories. But these are just a fraction of all the women in the Bible. So I've included this link, and I'll put it in the description on YouTube. And this is a sort of great resource I found that kind of goes through actually all the women in the Bible, and there's sort of tabs for all of them, including those that actually aren't named, and kind of what we can learn from them. Because otherwise, if we kept doing this series, although I think it's a great series, we would just never end. We'd be going on for quite a while, and I think it is good to have kind of a sort of more diverse topics that we cover. So hence this is the last one, at least for the moment anyway. We also chose those women as well because they're sort of kind of a microcosm, I guess, of the biblical women we see in God's kingdom. They are all lots of different people. You know, they're wives, mothers, judges, missionaries, queens. There are lots of different roles. Women in the Bible we see having not just fit into one role. They're not just wives and mothers. We see Deborah was a judge, Priscilla was a missionary, Esther was a queen, and we also see people being sort of combinations of these different roles. And we see that actually this is quite sort of a radical approach that the Bible presents, especially for its time, that we see these women in so many different roles. There's quite a positive image of women actually doing what were traditionally male roles. We talked about this last week with Priscilla, where Paul looks on her well, working alongside her husband, and that's the same with all of these women. These women are seen to be sort of quite a positive light, and so we can kind of, I guess, take from this that as Christians we are called to bring a level of equality that actually, both within, specifically in this regards, within gender equality, that there is not specifically male things and female things, that actually if God calls us to do something, then actually our gender doesn't matter, but also within a wider sense of equality as well. We see that these women were called upon to do God's will, and they faced, some of them, great hardships. We saw we saw Esther right at the beginning faced death to do what was called for her. We saw Ruth was uprooted and had to leave her home. Mary faced all sorts of sort of things, being an unmarried mother. We saw Mary and Martha, actually they lost a brother, and then they saw Jesus raising him again, but they did lose a brother. Sorry. Deborah was had to take people into battle. Priscilla again was uprooted from her home, and Hannah suffered with fertility. But nevertheless, they had great faith, and they all received quite great rewards, I guess, for that faith. We see that Esther, well, she didn't lose her life, actually. She was actually, what her actions were that could have resulted in her death, she actually received very, very positive consequences to that, and results of those actions. We see Ruth, she left her home, but actually she ends up with a family. She gets a new husband, she has a son, and she's actually part of the lineage to Jesus. We see Mary gave stability through her marriage to Joseph. Mary and Martha, as we said, regained their brother. Deborah and Priscilla helped to lead the Jews to victory. Deborah and Jael, rather. Priscilla, again, she helped establish a church, and the church thrives. And Hannah is rewarded with a son. God protected all of them in in some cases, what could be very difficult situations. And he provided for them to help achieve his will, as we see especially in Mary's story. And so I guess kind of what I took, as you can see on the side, we said great faith receives great rewards. God looks out for and cares for his people, and God does good for his people. We see, especially in Mary's story, we talked about passage where she's just praising God after receiving this news, that she rejoices in his plan for her, although it's not easy. And so we should rejoice in God's plans for us and his promises. If we talk about actually someone who we didn't look at in this series, if we go back to the story of Abraham and Sarah, which Amy did sort of touch on just a couple of minutes ago, but actually God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as many as the stars in the sky, and yet Sarah struggled with that because she couldn't have children, and there were I can't even imagine what kind of thoughts you go through. Your husband's been promised he's going to have loads of children and you can't give them. But ultimately, that promise was fulfilled. Sarah became pregnant, even though it seemed incredibly unlikely. And so God's promises and his plans can seem hard, but we should rejoice in them. We don't know the wider plan of God, and he does good for us. None of these women were part of a bad plan. They had bad things happen to them, definitely, but in the wider sense, God ultimately had good plans for them. Good plans are not the same as easy plans. And sometimes they can seem hard, but ultimately they are good. And also, a final point I just wanted to touch on, obviously trying to keep this relatively short and just round up everything, is that the right place for you is where God puts you. If we look at stories of Esther and Deborah, they were put in positions of power and authority because that was where they needed to be to fulfill God's plan for them. We even talked about that right back in the beginning, and in that Esther session, Amy talked about Mordecai talking to Esther and telling her about this is why God has put her there for this moment. But actually, Esther and Deborah probably didn't realize when they were first put in those positions why God had chosen to put them there. But through that position, they were able to do wider things for God's kingdom. And in sort of the other cases, we saw that God put people in the best places to fulfill his wish. We saw that Mary was kind of put, I guess, in a position to have that marriage with Joseph that would provide stability and security to raise Jesus. We see that Priscilla comes across Paul, she becomes friends, and actually Paul very much sort of helps her with her missionary, with the sort of parts of her kind of life as a missionary. That God put people in these places where they needed to be, that maybe that is a physical location, but also it's to do with your position and authority and the people that are around you. And so I think, especially at the moment, probably for a lot of us, there are kind of big questions around where is the right place for us in regards to after college. Second years have finished and are about to leave us, and those of us in first year are looking into universities or apprenticeships or whatever you want to do. And that can seem like a really daunting task, but ultimately you have to believe, I guess, that God will put you where you need to be. And actually, yes, there is going to be some form of element of your participation. You have to be willing as to where God tells you he wants you to go. He's not going to do everything for you, but just because things maybe don't go as you wanted them to go and you planned them, that doesn't mean that it wasn't how God wanted them to go. Often our plans for ourselves can seem very different to God's plan for us, but ultimately he knows better, and his plan for us is therefore better. So if we take anything away, if we take just one thing away from these women, it would be to admire in their faith that they had in God and to trust in his plan for you. And I guess that's sort of the overriding message we can kind of take from this series from the last 7 sessions. So as Imi said, thank you for following us during the Bible sessions. Which we kind of draw to a close in the year. We've had a great time, I think, overseeing you in the last year. We've been really, really blessed, and we look very much forward to starting again with a brand new series in September. So hopefully you can join us next week for our end of year celebration. But if not, we hope very much to see you all in September. Thank you.